Rebecca O'Donnell and Jyoti Kanich with Child Circle, who you will be hearing from shortly. Before turning to the presentation itself, and I know our time is a little tight, so we certainly want to make the most of it. I just want to take a few minutes to introduce KIND to those of you who are new to KIND and our work in Europe. KIND opened its doors, was launched actually by Microsoft in 2008 to provide legal representation for unaccompanied children in the United States to ensure that no child had to represent themselves in immigration court, which is a real problem in the United States, and also to advocate for the rights of children on the move. We both represent children directly in immigration proceedings out of our 13 offices in the United States and now also in Mexico. And we partner with pro bono attorneys, training and closely mentoring them so they can provide quality legal assistance to children. Our model has involved working with private sector pro bono from day one because of the significant gap in legal representation for unaccompanied children in the United States, and also our firm belief that the private sector could help to close this gap. Today, we have 675 law firm, corporate, law school, and bar association partners. We've trained over 50,000 lawyers, advocates, and other stakeholders, and we've placed over 12,000 cases of unaccompanied children with pro bono counsel or provided them in-house legal representation. We're also working with children on the move in Central America. In 2017, KIND, in collaboration with expert law center hubs, took our model to the UK to address an important gap in legal representation that legal aid was not reaching due to restrictions, namely citizenship and leave to remain cases for children. Today, 5 law center hubs participate in KIND UK, along with a growing number of law firms and corporate legal counsel. The hubs assign cases to pro bono lawyers and closely mentor them throughout the case. And to date, over 700 children have been assisted through this work, through the KIND UK collaborative, through the law firms and the law center hubs. And many pro bono attorneys have been trained and are participating. In fall 2019, we launched partnerships with nonprofit legal organizations in additional EU countries to strengthen representation for unaccompanied and separated children, while also supporting the growth of pro bono in Europe. Now, this came after we were hearing from some NGOs that there was an interest in seeing what pro bono could do to address some of the gaps in legal representation in Europe, in mainland Europe. And that really started an extensive fact-finding process for us to figure out where that might make sense to bring the model, where else it might make sense to bring the model. And we are humbled and proud today to say that we're partnering with European lawyers in Lesbos, the Lawyers Alliance for Human Rights in France, the Irish Refugee Council, and Immigrant Council of Ireland, and a number of law firms to represent unaccompanied and separated children on a range of legal needs, from family reunification to asylum, and a range of other needs. To date, about 500 children have been assisted through this work, and nearly 300 pro bono lawyers have been trained. We're also proud and humbled to partner with Child Circle, who you'll hear from today, with the aim to advance legal protection and rights of unaccompanied children at the EU level. Now, today's webinar focuses on our recently published report, and you'll be hearing about that in just a minute, Advancing Protection for Unaccompanied Children in Europe. We'd like to take this opportunity to talk to you about the key policy moment at the EU level with the potential to significantly impact the rights of unaccompanied and separated children, as well as the importance of, really the basis of the report, the importance of quality legal assistance for these children, and how private sector pro bono can help to achieve the vision, at the same time that legal aid has to be absolutely strengthened and expanded. And finally, the role that the legal community can play to strengthen protection for unaccompanied and separated children. Everywhere that we work, we've heard as KIND from pro bono lawyers how working with a child on the move in a child's immigration case has been truly the most impactful thing that lawyers have done in their career. And it's always moving to hear that. And we hear it again and again. And we've also seen the power of the pro bono community and voice to be a champion for unaccompanied children, to advance policies to benefit them. And with that, I'm going to turn to my colleagues to make sure that we have enough time to cover the range. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And I will be monitoring the chat if there's questions that are coming up, I guess, together with Marianne. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca O'Donnell from Child Circle. And we are truly delighted to be collaborating with Kind and Kind's partners around Europe on this really important issue at such an important moment. In a few words, a Child Circle is a non-for-profit centre of expertise and action that has been set up in Brussels a number of years ago, and our focus is on child rights and child protection, in particular child migration and child-friendly justice in EU law and policy. And our aim is always to bridge between the kind of EU laws and policies and national law, and between the experience of practitioners and policy. And we do that through projects, through reports, through guidance, developing tools or expert meetings and exchange of good practice. And today, I mean, Lisa has anticipated this agenda a little, which is very welcome, but we'll turn directly to the key points that we wanted to talk about with you. Jyoti, my colleague Jyoti Ganix, based in Switzerland, will share a word on the situation of unaccompanied children, and we'll see, of course, how diverse the situation is for them in terms of where they come from, what their circumstances are, but we'll also see the common needs and rights that they have. I'll say a word about the role of the EU. I mean, and it's a very important role. It's also very multifaceted. And we'll look at the connection, the often intricate connection between EU and national rules and practice. Quality legal assistance is at the heart of our report. And I think everyone on this call knows that safeguard is all the more important because of the complexity of the law in the area. And we'll see the range of challenges that exist to accessing quality legal assistance in general, and how those challenges can become all the more pronounced in certain settings and in certain proceedings. And to address all of those challenges, the report sets out recommendations to the EU, some of which concern the law and the ongoing law reform, but others which address how better to ensure the application of the law. And again, then that's where we come to how the legal community can help. Because of course, the work of lawyers day to day is the application of the EU law and is building better practice. And we also see that sometimes the bottom-up approach of building the better practice and then having that come into the future law is very important and can work as a pathway. So I'm going to turn immediately to Jyoti.
Hi, good afternoon. What I wanted to speak about briefly is the snapshot of the children coming to Europe. So I think we all know many are taking a long journey before they reach Europe. There's primarily 4 routes where children have been arriving in recent years, coming from Western Mediterranean or West African Atlantic routes to Spain, coming from the Central Mediterranean to Malta and Italy, and the Eastern Mediterranean to Greece and the Balkans. So it's important to keep in mind that we have different kinds of arrivals, different kinds of journeys, but many are really arriving on the borders and the front lines of the EU. From the latest fact sheet we have from the UN agencies, IOM, UNHCR, and UNICEF, looking at trends from the first half of last year, they saw the arrivals in those countries, Greece, Italy, Bulgaria, Spain, Cyprus, and Malta, being quite significant, and 37% of the children being unaccompanied. The majority were adolescents, so more than 90% were 15 to 17. So I think that also flags for us the importance of issues that come up with identity, with age assessment that we may speak of later. And the majority were male, so 85% were male. But in some countries, there was also really a significant proportion of females. For example, in Cyprus, it was 37% female, in Greece, 20% female, Bulgaria, 25%. So I think we often have a profile of a adolescent male, but there certainly is a need also for gender sensitive procedures at the arrival and with reception. Looking again to the snapshot, we see with nationalities a wide range. From the first half of last year, for unaccompanied children arriving in those border countries, there was about 20% Bangladeshi, 10% from Somalia, 10% from Afghanistan. Children arriving, many with protection needs from countries where they may have faced persecution or conflict, including, of course, Syria, Eritrea. But also children arriving from other countries in lower percentage, from Morocco, 6%, Guinea, 7%. And what we know from outcomes for those children, many are receiving a negative response to their asylum applications. So they're also seeking other forms of protection, perhaps national protection statuses in EU member states. So that's, I think, looking at the reasons for migration. We have, in some cases, clear refugee claims, in other cases, children in need of other forms of protection. But these profiles and reasons for migrating are often overlapping and may often change along the journey that the child may face, unfortunately, violence, trafficking, exploitation along their long journey. So I think regardless of these profiles, we really see the need for individual assessments and attention to each child's particular circumstances. And I would hand back to Rebecca to talk about the EU role in tailoring that approach.
Okay, thanks, Jyoti. And really, when we look at this image, we see the labyrinth that sometimes it feels like a labyrinth, this issue of EU and national competences and how they come together, how they fit together. Just as an example, I mean, EU obviously often sets out general rules which need to be implemented at national level. So you have these EU law and national law moving in tandem, and that's the case of the area of international protection, where EU rules set out the procedures and then national law goes into some more detail. But in other areas, member states have the competence to deal with the issue. For example, where there isn't an international protection claim, there may be another humanitarian claim that a child could make, and that's guided mainly by national law. And another example is, of course, that EU law doesn't regulate child protection obligations generally, but they can. The EU law can require certain child protection measures to be in place when EU law procedures are in operation. So again, this difficult intersection between national and EU law. And I say that simply to highlight that, of course, actually designing EU law in relation to children, unaccompanied children, requires very careful legal analysis. There are many challenges for EU lawmaking at the moment as well, of course. This is accentuated by the very different national situations that exist, where some countries are frontline countries, others are essentially transit countries, where children may pass through, but won't linger. And others, again, are countries of destination. We have, of course, polarized politics within countries, but also between countries in terms of how migration should be managed. And we'll see in a moment some of the more sensitive issues that are driving EU discussions. But again, in this context, with these participants where we're all together, we can also underline the important role of the Court of Justice, because, of course, the application of existing law requires a lot of careful thought. So just progressing to the next slide, because if I may ask Jyoti, we're at a key moment in EU lawmaking and policy making in the field. There is the new EU Migration and Asylum Pact, which was published in September. And that contains a reform of law and sets up new policy structures. But even while these laws are being remade, we need, of course, to make sure that existing EU law is properly applied. because new EU law will take years to negotiate and then years more to come into play. So we need to look at the current situation and really ensure proper application of the law. That is relevant also, for example, in relation to relocation schemes where children are being relocated from frontline countries to other countries. At the moment, there's simply a voluntary relocation scheme in place, and no longer a mandatory EU law scheme in place, but the EU plays an important role in supporting voluntary relocation, and we need to think carefully about that. And of course, EU role is very important in terms of the operational measures that the EU undertakes through Frontex and through EASO, the European Asylum Support Office. And equally, we have the EU Child Rights Strategy that was published on the 24th of March, and that focuses on what the EU and its member states should do to fulfill children's rights in this area, amongst others. So a full EU agenda at the moment. And if we go on to the next slide, we see that issues driving the discussion concern the following. Mandatory border procedures that have been proposed, so that at the external borders of the EU, the Commission has put forward procedures that might lead to that set in place screening measures, but that could result in detention. There are solidarity mechanisms put forward whereby there will be relocation schemes, but not only relocation schemes, also return sponsorship schemes where member states can support each other in returning persons to third countries, including unaccompanied children. And perhaps kind of most controversial in the new proposals, or amongst the most controversial issues, is the proposal that member states might actually relocate between themselves children who are subject to a return order but can't be returned. So you may find a situation where a child has entered into Greece, maybe being relocated to another country, but doesn't receive international protection, and then may actually suddenly be relocated to another country in the EU if it's not possible to return them. That's not a scenario we can exclude under these procedures. So I won't go through other points. Please do read the report where we look at each of these issues carefully and more fully. So just to give you a flavour of that. Maybe we can progress, Jyoti.
Sure. Yeah, so as Rebecca mentioned, that's the context in which we publish the report and where we really want to make a mark and to advocate for our joint vision for Kind Europe and Child Circle, and together with the other partners active in Europe, where we have really three elements of our vision. The first pillar is that unaccompanied children should benefit from free quality legal assistance in all procedures concerning their status and fulfillment of their rights. And just to save some time, I would look quickly into how does that look when we take a systems approach. And what we did in the report is to outline the elements of the legal aid system and provision of legal assistance to unaccompanied children. And this was building on the work that ECRE did guiding principles for legal assistance for unaccompanied children. I think they had the principles and indicators of their earlier project really informed our work and are a good tool to use. And we prepared a benchmarking tool that DLA Piper assisted us with to map the legal aid systems in 6 EU member states and in the United Kingdom. And drawing from that, we tried to really raise awareness. What do we mean by quality legal assistance? And what does it mean for unaccompanied children? Why is it so important? And where are there still challenges in practice? So briefly looking at the entitlement in law for quality legal assistance for free legal aid in all procedures. The snapshot we have really shows that in many European countries, free legal aid for unaccompanied children is guaranteed in asylum procedures, but we saw gaps in legal assistance for other procedures, for example, family reunification or challenging age assessment. So we really mapped a variety of procedures. And what we see also, I think what Marianne will speak to later, is that where we see gaps in quality legal assistance, this is where the pro bono model in the short term can fill the gaps in some of the countries. Child-friendly information, we noted many good examples from the DLA Piper mapping, but also from the work of Kind Europe partners and Kind UK partners, where they really have materials for lawyers to work together with children. We also highlighted some European resources like the Council of Europe Handbook for frontline professionals in providing child-friendly information to children. Other aspects of the system for the qualifications of lawyers and vetting, this varied greatly across the European countries we looked at. There was also specific training provided by NGOs in several of the countries where we're working with partners, including Belgium and France and the UK. And there's also EU projects that have resulted in tools such as Uprights and FAIR and DCI's Child-Friendly Justice in Action, where the European training materials are now being tailored and used at the national level. So we see a real importance for the EU to continue supporting that work. Vetting, I think we didn't see enough in vetting procedures in countries, or we had questions about vetting. When we looked at resources to support the lawyer and the guardian as they assist the child, this varied greatly depending on resources in the countries. So when we meant additional resources, we're speaking about the support from interpreters, from cultural mediators, doctors' reports. So in some countries, we saw a very complete picture where there were a lot of resources for the necessary evidence and supports for the child. And in other countries, unfortunately, very limited support where the child would have to somehow have support from other actors to bring the resources to the procedure. And the final areas we looked at were child-sensitive procedures, working in an integrated system. So for example, we showcased also the model, Kind's model from the US, which is an interdisciplinary model where lawyers are working together with social service to provide supports to children, and really holistically looking at the needs of the child so that they can focus on their procedure, but because their other needs are being met. So I think this integrated support to a child, recognizing the other needs they have as they go through procedures, and also then finally monitoring and complaints also varied greatly. We saw some good practices from ombuds institutions for children, and also some good practice with quality assurance in some countries. Maybe we will come back to some specific examples in the questions, but I will go to Rebecca to talk about other challenges we face. So we have some weaknesses in the system, but also good practices to exchange. But when we turn to the borders and transnational proceedings, I think we saw a very specific challenge that Rebecca will speak to.
Yeah, thanks, Jyoti. I mean, what we find is that all of those challenges do indeed become more pronounced. Obviously at the border, there are great difficulties in accessing information support and legal assistance. And that's the rationale for one of our partners' existence, European Lawyers in Letters, set up to secure that access to legal assistance at that frontline moment. We've seen that frequently unaccompanied children may simply not be identified either as children or as unaccompanied, and therefore they remain without assistance. I think everyone on the call is familiar with the situations of the hotspots where people may be kept for a very protracted period at the borders, sometimes in detention or effectively in detention, and a serious lack of monitoring in those situations and in other border situations. Now, one of the key areas also and it's a challenging area, is transnational proceedings. I spoke a moment ago about relocations. We also have family reunification processes where you may be tracing a family in another country, and ultimately one hopes transferring the child to be with the family. There are, of course, also situations where a child may have independently travelled to another country, and then the question becomes, should they be transferred back to where they originally made an asylum claim? So these are what we refer to as transnational proceedings, and these are terrifically challenging, both in terms sometimes of the lack of clarity in relation to the procedures that exist and the delays on procedures. And there is a real absence of practical measures that might facilitate the work of lawyers across borders. So again, with those challenges in mind, we also, in our report, set out what should be the case. So just in summary there, that in restricted settings and in complex procedures, which themselves pose acute risks to children, quality legal assistance should be actively facilitated and supported by authorities. And of course, part of us coming together with KIND was also thinking about how this happens in the US, you know, because indeed the US has all of the experience in the recent difficulties in the border between the US and Mexico, and also in terms of transnational procedures between the US and South America. So we try to reflect some of those practices and these experiences, and clearly those are evolving as we speak, but so that's why we're so excited to be looking at these issues with KIND. So moving on, just a word, if you go to the report, you will see that we have put together some very targeted recommendations to the EU across their different activities, whether that's the legal obligations in the international protection or the return directives at EU level, also to ensure that the EU policy framework actually does shine a spotlight on children and make procedures for children. We've talked about EU measures of practical support, including training, including the creation of resources. We were also very grateful to White and Case for the work they did to support this report, because they looked into jurisprudence of the court, of the European courts, and indeed the Committee on the Rights of the Child in this area. And that's in and of itself creates a very helpful resource for lawyers who are practicing in the field. And we think more can be done at a regional level precisely to create these kinds of resources. And of course, we also talked about what should happen when the EU agencies are involved. So encouraging you to go to the section in our report where we set these recommendations out. And then I think we move on to the next moment, and to you, Jyothi, perhaps.
Yeah. I think just to finish with the summary of the reports, the third part of our vision is looking into the longer term and really advocating for a single legal framework to provide uniform guarantees for all unaccompanied children. So I think many of you may also know that that's been a long-term advocacy point already. When we look at the EU agenda, that we see some directives concerning unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, some concerning children who may be suspected victims of trafficking, some concerning children who are irregular or under the return directive, and now perhaps we'll have new measures at the border. So I think we see that the different directives are providing some procedures, some supports, some aspects concerning children in certain categories or in certain procedures. And what we'd really like to see is really a single legal framework that is more uniform and which is providing a framework for a best interests determination or a pathway for that status determination for every child. And again, similar supports that they would have independent guardian and legal assistance in those procedures. And really that the outcome of those procedures would be ideally a comprehensive solution, looking at their protection needs, as we discussed earlier, whether that's refugee status or subsidiary protection, or perhaps a non-harmonized national protection status, or it could be also a decision for return, but really also then looking at the care arrangements and family reunification possibilities for the child, or possibly resettlement. So I think this is very much in line with the guidance from the Committee on the Rights of the Child, and in line with the joint general comments that were issued from the Committee on the Rights of the Child and the Committee on the Rights of Migrant Workers and their families, and really putting forward the best interests of the child in the spotlight, but ensuring that there's really non-discrimination and supports for all unaccompanied children.
And maybe if I may add, Josie, to that in the absence of this kind of single legal framework, the role of lawyers is to find the pathway between a whole series of procedures that may not make sense time-wise, sequentially, or in terms of the information gathering or the analysis or repeat analysis. So until that happens, the real extreme importance of lawyers is very, very, very evident. So maybe that leads us on to Marianne to talk to us about the role of the legal community.
Thanks, Rebecca. So yeah, it's clear that there's a lot still to be done to realize this vision that we have to ensure that unaccompanied children in Europe gain access to quality-free legal assistance. And we can't do this work alone. Kind was built on the idea that we need to collaborate, that in order to meet the huge needs that we face, that there's a role for the whole of the legal community. And as Lisa said at the outset of our session today, Kind has over 10 years experience now of bringing together the resources and skills of private sector lawyers with the expertise and insight of immigration and asylum specialists. And from that work across the US, Central America, the UK, and now also in Europe, this type of collaboration is happening and it's working. In Europe alone, in 2020, through our partnerships in Ireland, France, and Greece, we served together 428 children. And of those cases that were completed, 85% secured a positive outcome. And with our partners, we've worked with 21 different law firms and companies. And from those law firms and companies, 286 lawyers have been involved in casework or research. So I think that there's a lot of collaboration already happening, but there's a lot more for us still to do, and so many more opportunities for us to work together. So I just want to mention a couple of ways in which we see some of those collaborations happening in future, both in relation to the implementation of this work with Child Circle and this report, but also more broadly. So the first is actually getting involved directly in legal assistance for unaccompanied children on issues where there is no legal aid available or accessible. So that would mean getting involved with one of our local projects in France, Ireland, or Greece. And we're also looking at potential additional locations for our work. And so any firms, companies, or lawyers that get involved in that work receive rigorous training and support as they get involved in this area of law. And then another piece of work can be research to support this kind of policy work. As Rebecca and Jyoti mentioned, that was a significant part of our report, was research that was done by two of our law firm partners around jurisprudence relating to the protection of unaccompanied children, and also at current protections in law and policy in a number of different countries. We've also just recently launched some projects looking at researching country of origin and country of transit information to support our local casework. And then a third area directly related to the casework is around supporting best practices. And again, Rebecca mentioned this earlier, that it's really sometimes that's where we're looking to see where there is progress and development, is in the actual practical implementation and application of law. And the support and protection that's available to unaccompanied children across Europe really is like a labyrinth. It's like a patchwork quilt. So for example, if we look at age assessments, which, the process varies across Europe, which is one issue. Then the second is that it's consistently problematic. So we'd be interested to look at the different policies and practices to be able to shine a light on examples of good practice, as well as identifying places and policies that are harmful. Then the other type of engagement with this work is around allyship. And so that could be things like joining joint statements, mobilizing together to stand against harmful policies and practices that don't uphold international standards. Because the voice of the legal community it's unique and it's powerful. And there's an opportunity to share that that perspective with policymakers. And particularly once there has been engagement in pro bono work, either casework or research, to to shine a light on that new insight and expertise could be really valuable in places like annual reports, organizing lunches within law firms and companies, brown bag lunches to raise awareness of these issues and engage more lawyers in this work. Or it could be raising it in discussions with policymakers. And then I think there's also a significant role for bar associations and locally and regionally to issue position papers. And it's really a way of us all coming together as a whole legal community to stand behind this work. So these are just some of the ways that we can collaborate. We're also open to exploring other ideas and suggestions. So if you want to get involved in any of these that I've already mentioned, or you have other suggestions, please just send me an email. Our contact details will be shared at the end of the session today. But for now, we'll take a chance just to open it up to any questions. Feel free to either raise your hand or pop your question in the chat, and we can come to it.
Maybe if people are thinking of anything, and also of course can follow up with us, it's worth saying that the European Council of Bar Associations and Law Societies are indeed active in the field of migration, so a very good and strong voice for the law community, the legal community as well.
Absolutely.
Bearing in mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, no questions in the chat so far, and I don't see any hands raised. Feel free to hop in at any point, but in the meantime, Rebecca and Josie, do you want to move on? Yeah,
I mean, maybe just to kind of end the call in as simple a way as this, that we'd really encourage you to take a look at the report and share the report and think about the report. I mean, we look for questions and reflections because, a lot of this is creative work where people really need to think about how we can make progress together. And the report, is there to raise awareness of legal assistance and representation as a key safeguard. And you'll see, we put in brackets, there's a lot of focus on guardianship for unaccompanied children, and that's quite appropriate and right. But there shouldn't be an exclusive focus on guardians, because guardians are sometimes simply not equipped to deal with the very complex legal issues. So guardians should be working with lawyers and helping children access lawyers. The Lois, I think, has raised the question there in the chat about how is a voice heard at European Union level. And just to say, the report is one way to make sure the voice is heard, because it's shared widely and directly with MEPs, with the Commission, with the agencies, and with the member states, also organisations like the European Network for Ombudsmen for Children. So we make very specific recommendations also following on the report in various briefing papers that we have we have also published. So we shine a light on legal assistance. We're sharing experience that can inspire or prompt better measures, and we provide detailed recommendations and follow up on those. But another layer of the report is that it serves to illustrate the engagement that we all have in kind partnership in Europe, and the innovation that's possible through pro bono support, and whether that's in direct legal assistance or through the research and resources that have been so helpfully created by the law firms we've been working with. So Lois, you raised the question about whether or not there are workshops. Indeed, one of the things we're planning this year is specifically an expert workshop looking at transnational case management and the role of lawyers and how that can be improved. And that in turn feeds into policy recommendations, which we share with the policymakers. Jyoti, you might want to add the last word. I see we have a minute left on the clock on this sunny afternoon, when we're very grateful to people for joining us, but also conscious we must draw to a close.
I think I would pass back to Lisa if she wants to have a closing word. But as you said, just encourage everyone to take a look at the report and the related briefing papers, and to be in touch with us by email. And if Lisa or Marianne would also like to.
Thanks so much, Rebecca and Josie. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm very happy that we're able to respect the time frame that we set out, that we're going to end very close to being on time. But thank you so much for joining us. We would be very happy to talk with any of you one-on-one after this, if you would like to get involved in this work, or if you'd like to discuss any aspect of it more. And as we continue to develop this work, and we will be identifying kind of research and policy opportunities that you might be able to engage with, we will certainly reach out. And if there's any specific aspects of this work that you'd like more information on, perhaps even we could organize additional webinars around, feel free to send suggestions. This work is very much for us something that we want to make very practical and actionable and collaborative. So gaining your perspective would really be helpful to us to know how we can be more collaborative around this. So this is all of our email addresses here. Feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for being here. And yes, hope you have a great rest of your day. It's also miraculously sunny here in Ireland. So I'm going to go and enjoy that. So thank you for being here. And again, thank you, Rebecca and Josie, for your presentation. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.